Hello, everyone. My name is Adam Williams, and you are listening to another episode of Retail Redeveloped. Now, we are going to get into the weeds on all things retail futurism today. I am being joined by author, speaker, consultant to the stars, Doug Stevens. He is the author of The Retail Revival, which I have been digging into for the last few weeks and have very, very much enjoyed. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Parts of the book will scare the crap out of you if you're a retail guy. Parts of the book will make you really excited, but it's an absolutely enthralling read. Doug, would you take a minute and just introduce yourself, tell everybody a little bit about kind of what you do, where you came from, and how you came to sit in the seat that you're in now?
I'd be happy to, Adam, and thank you very much for having me on your podcast. I guess, the simple story is after about 20 years in the retail industry, working in both Canada and the U.S. In a number of different capacities with different brands, I sort of found myself in 2009 looking at the state of the retail economy, which, we don't have to have a long memory to remember the kind of hurt that was happening in the retail industry in 2009. And of course, everyone at that time was sort of looking very, myopically at the recession that was going on and sort of saying, well, as soon as this is over, we can kind of get back to business as usual. But my feeling at that time was that there really was no more business as usual. Apart from the financial collapse that was happening, what I also perceived was that there were deeper changes happening really in the entire economic landscape. The middle class, as we knew it for about the previous 50 years, was evaporating very quickly. Demographics were changing. The media landscape had been pretty much obliterated at that point by the entrance of social media into the mainstream. And technology, of course, was really changing consumer behavior. So I felt that, even when we emerged from the recession, we were going to see a very, very different retail landscape. And I didn't see anyone really articulating what that could look like. So around 2009, I set up Retail Profit with the intention of really digging deep into these various phenomena and trying to articulate a vision of what the retail landscape might look like 10 years from now. And in 2012, I wrote my first book, The Retail Revival, which sort of looked at where we had come from as a retail industry, where we found ourselves at that point. The book was released in 2013, and sort of positing an idea of what the future might look like. I followed that in 2017 with another book called Reengineering Retail, which really started to look at some of the finer points of the changes that were happening. And my attempt there was to put together a really contextual picture of what was going on and what retail marketers could expect. That book, much to my delight, has done very well. It's now been translated into 4 foreign languages and is used as a textbook in a lot of retail curricula. So that's fundamentally what I've always tried to do, is not just present a laundry list of the things that are happening, but context as to why those things are occurring and what we can expect when we extrapolate some of these trends out forward, what we can expect the retail world to look like. So in addition to writing, I also am the retail correspondent for CBC Radio Canada. I write a column for the Business of Fashion in the UK. I do a lot of speaking work around the world each year, and we also consult on very specific projects with brands like Google, LVMH, BMW, et cetera. So in a nutshell, not a very small nutshell, I'm afraid, but in a nutshell, that's what Retail Profit's all about.
Well, Doug, I want to ask you a couple questions, and I want to dig into engineering retail. I'm actually holding this book in my hands right now, and I will put a link to the book in the show notes as well. But I would like to start off. I mean, you have obviously been doing this for a while. I mean, you work with the heavy hitters: Walmart, Google, Home Depot, Disney, BMW, Coca Cola, Intel, all these incredible brands, and you've written 2 books within a half a decade span. I'd love for you to talk about how those 2 books are different And then also, what were the driving forces to come out with that second book in pretty quick succession? What had changed so drastically in those few years that you were like, man, I left some stuff out. I've got to double down and do another one of these.
Yeah, so I think with Retail Revival, what I felt at the time was that while some people in the community around 2009, 2010 were sort of foretelling the death of retail as we knew it, I felt that it was really more of a revival, a renaissance, if you will. And I felt that it was important to understand how we got to the retail world, the retail landscape that we see around us today. Where did that come from? We wound up in North America in particular, and you could include much of Western Europe in this as well. We wound up with a tremendous amount of retail. In the U.S., it was, at the time I wrote the book, it was about 46 square feet of retail per man, woman, and child.
Which is like 3x Europe or something crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's double that of Canada, 3 times that of Europe. I mean, it was an inordinate amount of retail. So how did that happen? How did we get there? And so the first part of the book really takes a historical look at all of the factors that led to this inordinate amount of retail distribution in the landscape. And some of those factors being things like the fact that most Americans, and frankly most North Americans, considered themselves at the time to be relatively middle-class consumers. There was a robust middle class. Bipartisan government activity was promoting a middle class, making it easier for people to get educations, making it easier for people to start businesses. We also had it around that time, of course, an absolutely astronomical explosion in population. The baby boomer generation by far was the largest generation to ever grace the face of the earth at that point. And it was really the front part of that generation that was by far the largest and most robust portion of the baby boomer generation. And so by the time you got to about 1962, you had the largest portion of the largest generation in the history of the world somewhere between the ages of 5 and 15 years old, which anyone who's got a family at home with 5 kids in it that are 5 to 15 years old knows that that's the time in their life where they need just about everything, right? So we had all this economic activity going on. We had this explosion of the middle class, an explosion of population and of development. GDP was soaring through those periods of time, and as a consequence, we needed a ton of retail. And then all of a sudden in 2009, the bell rang. And it became clear that much of what we considered to be the middle class was being propped up by inordinate amounts of debt. And it became clear pretty quickly that the emperor really did have no clothes, and that many Americans were struggling and were in fact not middle class anymore. They were working class Americans. And so the entire economic landscape had changed. And so it was really looking at, okay, well, if the forces that got us here today are coming apart, what can we look forward to tomorrow? And so that was really the point of Retail Revival, was to explain that fundamental change. Reengineering Retail, the impetus for that book was really more around something that Marc Andreessen said in 2013 in an interview. Marc Andreessen, of course, is one half of Andreessen Horowitz, huge venture cap firm in Silicon Valley. Very, very smart and noted investor. But he said something that caught my attention, and that was in an interview. He said that fundamentally retail was dead, that virtually everything was going to be purchased online. Brick-and-mortar retail was going to go the way of dinosaurs. There'd be massive fallout in the market, and online was the place to be. And I just felt fundamentally that was a statement that really needed to be explored. And so that's where Reengineering Retail takes off. From that statement by Andreessen, it looks at both sides of the equation, both the extraordinary growth of online, but also the changing purpose. and value of retail stores, of physical stores. And it presents a different narrative, not one where retail is dying, not one where the value of physical stores is negated, but in fact, one where the value of physical stores is exponentially greater than it has been in the past, but requiring an entirely different thinking about how we retail and what a physical store looks like. So it really looks more broadly at the entire set of issues that are affecting the retail industry and provides a vision for what that future is going to look like, and moreover, how retailers and brands can thrive in it.
Yeah, and it's a tremendous read. I want to hit you with a quote from your book first, since we're already talking about Andreessen. Retail is not dead, not at all. It's merely shedding its skin. That's something, that kind of metamorphosis notion is something that I hear a lot from kind of the think tank guys that are on the cutting edge, and I thought that was a very apt description. So you break up the book right from the beginning into 4 parts. And the first one, the one that I was, polishing up my resume and maybe thinking about going and getting a job, dropping fries somewhere at McDonald's or something, the whole first section is called Retail is Dead. The second section, Media is the Store. The third section, The Store is Media. And the fourth, Reengineering Retail. If you wouldn't mind, would you just spend a moment explaining just why you set it up in those 4 quadrants and a couple takeaways that you think are important from those? I'd love to start at Retail is Dead, because again, that's a great way to get somebody's attention like me that makes their living in the retail world. So I'd love to start there.
Sure. I felt that it was really important for the industry to understand in no uncertain terms the magnitude of the shift that is taking place. To give due credit to someone like Marc Andreessen, this is a guy that is not, just shooting off the cuff. He really understands what's happening, particularly as it applies to online retail. So, yeah, the first part of the book sort of looks at that side of the equation and says, okay, let's look at how the landscape is changing by virtue of online. And furthermore, let's look at how the whole concept of online shopping is likely to change in the future. I mean, today, online shopping still remains a relatively conscious activity. We go to Amazon or we go to Macy's online to buy things. It's a conscious sort of activity, and furthermore, it's not very social. It's not very engaged. It's certainly not much fun as we know it today. So the first part of the book, first of all, looks at this magnitude of online sales, the fact that online today is growing at about 20 to 22% each year globally, about 15 to 16% in the U.S. We know that in the U.S. last year, online retail was growing at a rate that was 400% greater than that of the retail economy in general in the country. So there is something to be said for the fact that, yes, there's tremendous momentum behind online shopping. Consumers are very, very clearly comfortable spending enormous sums of money in some cases on things online, including luxury goods, and that is likely to continue because as technologies like virtual reality, augmented reality, AI, as these technologies become more and more pervasive, as our capabilities with those technologies improves, we are going to see these propel online spending to an even greater height and really change the nature of what we consider to be a trip to the store. And my belief is that we are going to eventually shop from inside experiences, that a store online is no longer just going to look like a digitized catalog, but we will literally step into experiences, learn how to do things, commune with people inside those experiences, and actually be able to make cogent decisions about the things that we're buying from inside those experiences. So that's sort of the first part of the book. From there, we go into this idea that what all that adds up to is that media in virtually every form, whether it's my smartphone, my tablet, my laptop, my smart television, my appliances. All of those forms of media are in essence becoming the store. In the consumer's mind now, when it dawns on them that they need something, their first impulse is not to just simply blindly jump in the car and drive to a shopping center to find out what their options are. The first stop is online. Increasingly, the first stop online is Amazon. So consumers are treating media increasingly as the store. It's the place to find out what my options are, to get great product information, and increasingly to transact sales. That raises the question, well, if media is becoming the store, then what the hell is the point of having stores? Why even bother having physical stores? And all of the costs and everything that comes with operating physical stores. And that's where the book takes a real turn, because it presents the idea that, in fact, we have treated for the last several hundred years, we've treated stores really as being the final point in the purchase funnel. It is really just the mechanism that distributes the product to the consumer if everything else goes well. And my theory is that that funnel is inverting, that increasingly physical stores are the place that consumers first are exposed to a
right.
product or a brand, and that it becomes, it's the experience that catalyzes their awareness of that and actually creates a media channel, and that stores are in fact becoming that media channel. So that's what I mean when I say that the funnel is flipping. We've used media to drive people to stores for hundreds of years. Now my belief is what smart retailers are doing is they're using wicked, amazing physical store experiences to drive consumers to their online ecosystem.
So
and that's where true customer lifetime value comes from.
Would you consider like Beta, Showfields, Neighborhood Goods, Naked, are these the kind of first wave of these using your store as a billboard, retail as a service, kind of tip of the spear for what you're talking about now?
Yeah, they're good examples of early pioneers in the space. So, a brand like Beta, for example, recognized a few things. They recognized that and for anyone that doesn't know, Beta is I guess the best way to, I don't think we can call them a startup anymore. They're a very well-funded company at this point, but they are a company that essentially creates retail environments where the purpose of the environment is really not to necessarily sell products to consumers, but to expose products and brands to consumers, to allow consumers to try things, to experience those products, to gather information. And yes, if they wish, they can buy the product. But in most cases, that purchase is directly with the manufacturer of the product, not with Beta themselves. Where Beta makes its revenue is by sharing the data from those product-consumer interactions with the brands that create those products. So they sort of turned the whole equation on its head by saying, look, the value here in this physical environment is not just hawking products and kind of moving merchandise. It's the incredible trove of data that we can gather from these customer interactions that we can share with brands. It's a great form of intelligence. So they're one example. Neighborhood Goods, another great startup brand out of Plano, Texas, that kind of took a page from Rachel Sheckman and Story in New York City and now creates larger scale environments, about 20,000 square foot environments that host 40 to 60 different brands in the environment. And what Matt Alexander and his team provide is retail as a service. So they are hosting the space, they're creating the merchandising plan and the adjacencies, curating these amazing brands all together, and providing consumers with a great experience. They host events, they have food and beverage options within the store. It's a really cool environment. And again, they're sort of saying, look, the value here is not just in trading merchandise, it's in creating an experience and giving these new brands in the marketplace an umbrella to come under and to test the retail waters and develop awareness. So in their case, rent is sort of the cost of customer acquisition, not just the cost of distribution. So yes, there are a lot of really cool brands out there doing great things, including Showfields and others, that are really challenging the traditional model of retail.
So you mentioned that these guys were kind of early pioneers in the space. What do you think that next evolution or revolution is? Like, what do you think that you're seeing in beta or story or neighborhood goods that will be tweaked again, and we'll see kind of like a 2.0 version of this? Is there something specific that you think that they'll end up changing or morphing into?
Well, I mean, you can already sort of see other brands that are tapping into what these originators have done. If we look at Nike, for example, and I've spoken to people at Nike about this, people that were involved in the development of these stores. But if you look at Nike by Melrose, for example, in Los Angeles, or the House of Innovation in New York, another good example, they have sort of taken a page from some of these pioneers. They've looked at this whole notion of the physical store now being a media channel that sort of turns on remarkable experiences in store for consumers. And they have developed those concepts with that in mind. The Nike House of Innovation is very clearly a media play aimed at, reestablishing Nike as an originator in this category, reestablishing their authenticity, their history, their credibility, and engaging consumers in deeper way, not just going in and looking at, racks and rows and walls of running shoes, but actually doing things, creating things, trying new things, and really, exploring a new level of engagement at retail. So it's almost like 2.0 is manifesting itself among larger brands that have the deep pockets to create these amazing environments, but fundamentally they're using the playbook of some of these pioneers.
The other thing that I like that those stores are doing, and I was also impressed with Converse, their flagship store in New York, which is close to the Nike House of Innovation, is the customization focus that you can tell. I mean, you can go down just like you can with Vans, for example. I mean, you can go down and make a Converse in 50 different fabrics and different piping and different insoles and different everything. And I think that's a really cool kind of twist on a very old business.
Yeah, I agree completely. And you remind me of something that I talk about in the book, because we talk about customer experience a lot, right? I mean, you could argue that for the last better part of a decade, this notion of customer experience has been sort of beaten to death in the retail industry. And so I guess what I found curious, though, was that we had been talking about customer experience for so long, and yet as a consumer, I could count on one hand at the end of a year how many retail experiences I had that I felt were truly remarkable, where it seemed as though the retailer really made an effort to deliver, what one could consider a memorable customer experience. So I sort of wondered what the disconnect was. And so the book sort of delves into what does this mean? What is a remarkable customer experience? How do we know when we've had one? And moreover, as a marketer, how do you create one? So I started looking at this whole notion of customer experience across retail, hospitality, travel and tourism, you name it. I looked for brands that are widely regarded as the purveyors of great experiences. And I tried to find a commonality. What's the common thread in terms of how they do this? And what I found was that there were really 5 key components, and you just mentioned one of them. But the 5 are remarkable experiences tend to have an element of surprise. So as a consumer, we are presented with something that we didn't expect. That can be a way of selling the product. It can be the setup of the store, the look of the store, the way it's merchandised. It can be the people in the store. But something about it is surprising. It's different. The next piece is uniqueness. Great brands tend to actually create a trademark way of selling what they sell. They don't sell it the way everyone else did. It's sort of the way Casper came to the market and changed the way beds were sold, you know. So great brands tend to look at the way the rest of the industry does something, and they deliberately change that. They change it and turn it into a trademark way of selling what they sell. The third piece is what you mentioned, and that's personalization or customization. Virtually every memorable experience we have as consumers has some element of personalization to it. And that can be as simple as someone remembering our name when we go into a store, or it can be something as elaborate as creating your own running shoe. But there's some element of bespoke personalization. The fourth element was engagement. We just found that fundamentally, great brands who deliver remarkable experiences engage consumers on a deeper level. That can be physical, emotional, or cognitive, but they involve more of the consumer in the experience. And then finally, the last piece is repeatability. All of that, what I just mentioned, is no good if you can't execute it over and over and over again in a uniform fashion. So repeatability is key. It happens to spell super, the acronym super. So it's
that
an easy way of remembering.
Now I'll remember it.
It's an easy way, of remembering the five elements. But I think if you now consciously go shopping, for the rest of the week and keep an eye out for those five elements, you'll notice that very, very few retailers achieve five of them. Some of them might achieve one or two. But
so
the best of the best
sticks with
nail
you,
all five.
Yeah, who sticks with you as a group that can deliver all five? It sounds like a pretty short list, but is there one or two that we can all kind of look to kind of crack the code?
Well, in many respects, I think that a brand like Sephora, for example, has done a very good job of balancing all of these elements. I don't know that there's anyone necessarily that we can look at and say, this is the poster child for someone that just nails all five. But I think Sephora does a great job. Sephora has really, really efficient online game. It makes shopping for the products that they sell very easy. They have a fantastic mobile platform that actually transforms in its use when you actually walk into a store with the mobile app open. It turns into store mode, gives you all kinds of tools that you can use in the store. But the store experience itself is highly engaging. They've always relied on sort of the theater of retail. They know that people love watching makeovers. They love being participants in getting facials or makeup applications, makeovers. So they really fire on all cylinders. So they're a good example for brands to look at as to how you can celebrate each of these different platforms, be it the online platform, mobile, or the store experience itself. I think a good role model.
And it makes sense that they would try to stay ahead of the curve because there are a lot of interesting brands coming for them right now. I went to the Glossy store when last time I was in New York. It was a very, very interesting experience. Blue Mercury's popping up. There's so many people that are coming to try to take a piece of that pie. I absolutely get why they're trying to stay ahead of it.
Yeah, and I'll give you another example of a brand that's taking a somewhat daring approach. Canada Goose. So Canada Goose, a manufacturer of outdoor clothing, apparel, very expensive outdoor clothing, by the way. They sell parkas that can be, $1,500. It is not unusual. They launched a new store in Toronto at the end of last year called the Canada Goose Journey. And if we want to talk about surprising and unique, this is a store that does not stock any products. I would say that the store is probably about 10,000 square feet, if I had to guess at it. And it is really and truly a media experience about Canada Goose. So you enter the store through a store facade that is very, very unusual. It looks like you're going into sort of a mountainous cavern when you enter the store. You walk across a virtual ice crevasse when you enter. So the experience begins right there. You feel as though you're walking across cracking ice. You're led into a 360-degree media theater where you experience a story about the Canada Goose brand told through the voice of four-time Iditarod champion Lance Mackey. You're then led, and all of this is a curated tour, so you are led by a guide into the Canada Goose cold room, which is a room where there is actually snow falling. It's sub-zero.
This is so Canadian. Everything about this is so Canadian.
It is, yeah. It couldn't get more. All you'd need is just to be covered in maple syrup while you do it. But
or dress like a Mountie.
Right, exactly. So you get to experience their product in the conditions. You are immersed in the history of this brand. It positions them once again as being an originator, a leader in the category with authentic history, and it's fun. It's just a fun thing to do. And at the end of the experience, yes, you can shop online directly in the store, and they can deliver products to you in as little as 2 hours. And the people that you're working with are expertly trained to know pretty much what size in garment you're going to need regardless of your choice. That, to me, is a brand saying, we are going to be surprising, unique, personalized, engaging, and we're going to do it in a repeatable way. And they're taking a huge risk in doing this because, frankly, most of the retail industry still doesn't get it. They still don't understand the value in taking that kind of risk.
So do you think that that is going to become more common, or do you think it will go 180 degrees where people will try to make augmented reality so good that, you know, I'm sitting here wearing my Oculus glasses, looking at that, you know, $2,000 recliner that I want, sitting in my house while I'm getting a virtual tour from, you know, the guy that made it by hand, right? I'm making this up, obviously, but do you think it'll get more virtual or super tactile like what Canada Goose is trying to do? That reminds me of like the Samsung store in New York. You walk in there and there is a recording studio and a TV wall and all these crazy experiences that you can do with your phones. And which way do you think it's going to go?
I think it's going to go both ways. I think that we are absolutely going to see massive advancements in terms of how we shop online. And to your point, that's very much what I'm referring to when I say we'll shop from inside the experience. So you're right. We'll test drive cars. We will walk through hotel rooms that we intend to stay in. We will, experience the sights and sounds of retail stores from the safety and comfort of our own sofa. So there's no question of that. We're already starting to see very early signs of that. Amazon made an investment in a company that I was talking with for some time called Obsess, a startup started by a young lady named Nia Singh from New York City. That creates virtual environments, CGI environments for brands that consumers can literally navigate on their mobile device and shop as though they're shopping in a store. Amazon obviously took note and became a major investor in Obsess. So clearly, they understand that the nature of the online shopping experience is going to change. However, there are things that we can't do online, and for the foreseeable future, we won't be able to. And that will include a lot of the sensory aspects of retail, the things we hear and see and smell, and in some cases taste, the ability to actually physically commune with products and people, and to feel like you're part of a community, to become part of a brand community where you feel that sense of belonging and affiliation. So those are still the aspects of physical retail that I think are going to be super, super important as we go forward. But yeah, I think that if we project into the future 20 years from now, or maybe even less, I think the shopping center itself is going to be a showcase of brand experiences and product experiences. We will no longer need to go to the store to simply drag merchandise home with us, but we can go and we can find out what are our options? What things can I explore and do and try and have fun doing, and then simply engage with that brand online and have those products delivered. I think that's going to be, in essence, what every brand is going to have to do going forward. Now, I will also say that when we talk about customer experience, we often talk about it in a way that sounds like it's always got to be high touch, it's always got to be deep and immersive and extended and protracted. I don't think that that's the case. Joseph Pine, who is sort of the OG experience guy, who wrote the experience economy in the 1990s. He wrote the foreword for Reengineering Retail, and he's a friend of mine, and he says, he has an interesting way of putting it. He said, experience can be one of two things. It's either time well spent or it's time well saved. And I think that's important. I mean, we can look at Amazon and we can say Amazon is not an experience, but I beg to differ. I think Amazon is indeed an experience, and it's an experience that ends up being time well saved. So I can literally find a product that I want to buy on Amazon within 5 seconds, and in the next 5 seconds, I can have that product paid for and being picked in their warehouse and on the way to my home. That's time well saved. And Amazon's done a tremendous job in creating that sort of frictionless slide for consumers to get on and get the things that they need quickly. So we can't negate convenience as an experience either. But on the other hand, not everyone can be Amazon. And so if you're not Amazon, you may have to take the higher touch route and look at time well spent for consumers.
Right. I mean, I would even go a step further. I mean, if you want the next one, the cheapest one, the blue one instead of the red one, just any kind of commodity purchases, I'm short in that business. You know what I mean? Like if you're not Amazon, good luck catching up to just like, for example, I needed new shoelaces for my 7-year-old's, sneakers that he tore, right? Like I don't even want to, I'm annoyed that I had to think about it that for that long, right? Amazon, It's on its way. They showed up, they're in his shoes and we're done, right? So that type of purchase is in the rearview mirror. And to your point, I think, retailers are going to be fighting over everything else, which is where experiences become so huge. Like I was in the Sonos store when last time I was in Manhattan, and that's a very, very different thing. That me personally, I'm a huge music geek, right? Like I want to touch it, feel it, see the user interface, hear how it sounds in a living room, hear how it sounds with a movie, hear how it sounds with rock and roll playing. That's a very sensory type experience for me that I wouldn't feel comfortable just jumping on Amazon. Oh, this one has good reviews. I'm sure I'll love it, right? It's just two completely different experiences.
Yeah, very much so. And, it depends on our degree of interest and affiliation with the product category. I mean, for some people in that exact situation would say, well, a speaker's a speaker. I don't care. Like, just give me whatever
heresy.
Seems
That's
to be
heresy.
Rated highest. And what's that?
That is heresy.
Well, you see, I would feel the same way. I like watches, I like guitars, things like that. So I would feel the same way as you do about those categories. But the fact of the matter is, you're absolutely right. For the consumer that wants a deeper experience, who takes the product and the category more seriously, really wants to make the right choice, those kinds of physical experiences are really important. I think that the overarching problem that every retailer now faces, and this is something that I talked about in the Retail Revival, is that the whole retail economy prior to the advent of companies like Amazon, the entire retail economy was predicated on the concept of scarcity. So brands and retailers thrived in an environment where consumers had very, very few choices. So if you were a vacuum cleaner store and you sold Hoover vacuum cleaners, and you came to a town that didn't have a Hoover vacuum cleaner salesperson or a store, you could be wildly successful. And it was that way for an awful long time. And now we live in a world where the consumer's problem isn't scarcity, it's sheer abundance. Virtually every single product that is available to me, I can find 6 different versions of it available online at my fingertips and can have it on my doorstep tomorrow. So in that environment, as a retailer, you have a choice now. You can either search the world for a product in some cave somewhere that no one sells. Only you sell it, and it's this remarkably unique and exclusive product, and good luck finding that product. Or you can make a different choice, and that is sell things that other people sell, but develop a way of selling them that is so completely different and so much more remarkable and enjoyable for consumers that it redefines the category, and it provides you with a moat that you can put around your brand, that experiential moat. But that's your choice, and it's binary. So every brand or retailer has to choose one or the other.
Can you think of other? You mentioned Casper earlier, which I actually spoke with the CEO of Casper on the show a while back. It was a really interesting conversation. Can you think of other people that have done that successfully that we would recognize that they're selling something that people have been selling for years? Like I'll think of an example. One of my partners just bought a car from Carvana, and people have been selling cars since horses went out of fashion, but nobody thought to put a 6-story vending machine on the side of the road and giving you a big token where you can come up and feel like you won the lottery when your car comes down. Can you think of other people that have taken that message to heart and tried to think of a totally different way to sell?
Well, yeah. I mean, did we ever think that we would get into a stranger's car on a street? In a street in a major city, that a stranger
or stay in
would
a
pull
stranger's
up in a car.
bedroom in their house,
or,
right?
Or sleep in a stranger's bedroom. Exactly.
That's still too much. I need the whole apartment, guys. I'm not doing the single room. I'm sorry.
So yeah, I mean, those, certainly Uber and Airbnb, I mean, they're examples of companies that came in and completely turned industries on their head. As it pertains to retail, I mean, Stitch Fix is a great example. There's nothing unique about the product that they sell. The products that they sell are things that you could find or reasonable facsimiles in dozens and dozens of retail stores. But Stitch Fix came along and said, but what if we could leverage a degree of technology, use AI, to become more informed about your preferences and your style choices as a consumer, and then over time we can just simply send you clothing without you even having to order it. And you just send us back what you don't want. I mean, that was a concept. I mean, if you'd have said that to someone like Mickey Drexler in 1995, he probably would have looked at you like you were out of your mind. You can't do that. That's insane.
Or what about Rent the Runway? I mean, that's to think that my wife, who is not the lowest maintenance human on the face of the planet, would be a huge fan of Rent the Runway. Still blows my mind. I thought that she would be the last person that would ever do that, and she thinks it's the coolest thing ever. And there's a new one that specializes in anthropology, and I'm forgetting the name, or that kind of style that she loves also. And I'm shocked by that.
Yeah. Well, and there are brands that also looked at the retail landscape and saw things that others didn't necessarily see. If you look at the way our behavior as it pertains to apparel has changed, we live in a world now where if you're concerned about your social media image, you need a lot of clothing, right? You can't go out on Friday and go out on Sunday and be seen in the same clothing because, hey, we take pictures now. We take pictures of everything. Every meaningful experience in someone's life is now documented online. And so for that reason, we need more clothing. Witness the rise of fast fashion. This notion that we need to go buy a $5 T-shirt and really, really cheap, poorly made clothing. So Rent the Runway looks at that and said, well, if we need more clothing, why do we have to buy it? Why do we have to own it? We just want to use it, and so this notion of fractional ownership in the apparel market is something that, again, 20, 30 years ago, people would have said, you're out of your mind. Nobody's going to rent a ball gown to wear. It's crazy. But sure enough, they've done well with that concept.
Yeah, they really have. And I saw them speak, or one of their brand ambassadors speak, and she mentioned that they were the largest dry cleaner in the world. Think about that. That's crazy. So where did we leave off on the quadrants? I know we touched on retail is dead. I believe I bunny trailed us somewhere in between media is the store and the store is media, and I want to make sure that you can touch on all four of those before I let you go on with your day.
Sure. Well, the last one, the whole notion of re-engineering retail is, and the title for the book was really deliberate because I felt that that's kind of where we find ourselves, is that in order to move successfully into the next decade of retail, it's not a tweak. We're not talking about just a little bit of organizational shakeup, a few new personnel, and applying a few heady concepts to the business, and we can make it through this. It really and truly, to my mind, when you consider all of the factors that we see around us today, retailers need to literally perform a re-engineering of their businesses. And so the last part of the book gets into the how. We've talked about the what and the why, but how do you do this? And so the last portion of the book is really a roadmap to creating a new kind of retail concept. And a lot of that, of course, has to do with innovation. Now, innovation is interesting. It's an interesting word because if you say to a room full of 100 people, hey, who here is a proponent of innovation? I reckon virtually every hand in the room is going to go up. That's like saying, who believes in motherhood and apple pie, right?
There's going to be an old guy in there that refuses to raise his hand and just starts yelling about how kids like to get around on scooters in big cities. There will be one guy, I promise you.
That's right. Yeah, there's always the one curmudgeon that is the holdout, for sure. But for the most part, we've been trained to accept the idea that, innovation is a good thing. And most companies will say that innovation is the lifeblood of our company. It's a core value. The fact of the matter is this. There have been other studies that have shown that, in fact, only about 15 to 20% of retail executives have a favorable opinion of innovation as they have known it in their corporate careers. And secondly, in a lot of cases, when I talk to executives and they're talking about innovation projects, and I ask them for more specifics on what those innovation projects are, all too often I find that what they're really talking about is not innovation at all. It's iteration. It's incremental improvement on things that they already do. Innovation is not, making your cost structure more efficient. Innovation is not doing a redesign of your store look. Innovation is creating something that has truly never existed or never been done before. It's a totally different thing. And so, part of what we have to do in companies is a better job of defining innovation rather than just throwing it around like it's a worthless sort of word. We really have to do a better job of defining it and getting to that idea that it means creating something entirely new. And that raises the specter of creativity. And the fact of the matter is, for most of us, we spend most of our lives having the creativity beaten out of us. We all, when we're 3 years old, a room full of 3-year-old children is probably the most creative group of executives you will ever find. But over the course of their life, they will have that creativity summarily beaten out of them, drained out of them. They will have their creative concepts and ideas crushed by teachers and by administrators and by bosses and by their parents in some cases. And so the remarkable few people that wind up making it into adulthood with any level of creativity intact is rare. They're a rare group of people. And so the last part of the book sort of not only talks about here's the roadmap for how you need to create these new experiences, but here's the roadmap for how internally you can actually develop and foster and nurture the creativity that your organization is going to need to do this work. Because if you don't have that, it's basically like saying we're going to build a house out of bricks, but we just don't have any bricks. So that's really the last part of the book, is trying to put it all together to leave the reader feeling like, okay, I think we can actually do this now.
There was a quote that you mention in the last part of the book by James Bertrand that says, "Once we rid ourselves of traditional thinking, we can get on with creating the future." And I thought that put a nice little period on that point that you were making.
Yeah, because all too often we're brought down, right? We're brought down by that one person in the room, as you put it, who takes our vision, our lofty dreams of the future and how great it can be, and they drag it back down to earth and say, we already tried that and it didn't work. Yeah, or that'll never work in this industry because, and they list off, 3 paradigms about the industry that would prevent any level of innovation from taking place. We have to shed that. And in the book, I'm not afraid to say that you should identify those people in your organization and you should fire them. You should get them out, because they are, they are really the most detrimental force in the organization. You have to start with people who believe that there can be a better way of doing things. Otherwise, you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, that I absolutely get that. And it reminds me a lot, this massive shift, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before, that retailers and large landlords are experiencing right now reminds me a lot of the music business, right when, a month after Napster hit, right? They're just, everybody's like, like we've got to innovate or die. And obviously there was a lot of dying that happened until Spotify came back and kind of resuscitated the industry. So a couple things. I want to do 2 things real quick. You've been extremely generous with your time, and once again, I'm being joined by Doug Stevens, author of a book I'm holding in my hand right now called Reengineering Retail. I want you to tell everybody how they can interact with you. Are you on social media, LinkedIn, email? Tell everybody where they can get the book. I assume they can get it where I did, which is Amazon. But if there's a different place you would rather them go check it out, just let everybody know how they can interact with you. And then I'm going to give you a couple quick kind of rapid fire questions before we wrap everything up.
You bet. So, Retail Profit has a pretty significant online presence. So we're on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn, and I'm certainly on both of those. But the mothership is retailprofit.com. If anyone in your audience wants to just visit retailprofit.com, every link to every different network that we play on is there. You can get links directly to the book. But I would say if you're interested in the book Reengineering Retail, visit a physical retailer to find it. You can go to any major bookstore will carry it. But hey, let's throw a nod to our friends in physical retail and go buy the book there.
I like it. I like that advice. So a couple quick. I want to get your knee-jerk reactions to a couple pieces of the book. The first one, experiences will be the most valuable products of the next century. Can you quantify, what does that mean to you in a nutshell?
So in a nutshell, what it means to me is that we have to come around to the idea that physical stores are indeed a media channel. and that customer impressions in physical stores have a value. Now, some of that value can be positive, or if you have a horrible store experience, it can be negative. But either way, we have to start looking at the experiences that take place in physical retail as media experiences, and frankly, we should be valuing them as media experiences. And we are embarking on a project here right now as I speak at Retail Profit to understand what the relative value of a physical experience in a store is compared to an experience that a consumer might have with a piece of branded media, be it digital or conventional. What is the relative power and value of those two kinds of experiences? Our belief is that a great store experience is exponentially more valuable from a media standpoint than just having a consumer watch a commercial or look at an ad. We want to prove out in monetary terms what exactly that differential is. So when I say experiences are the product, I truly believe that. I think that a physical store's value as a media channel for a brand or for a retailer will become as and potentially very soon more important than how much product is transacted within the four walls of that store.
That's going to be very interesting to watch. And another thing you mentioned multiple times in the book is that you think the future will entail people paying. The experiences will get so good in store that people will pay for the right to browse in a store, not actually buying the keychain, just walking around and having the experience. How far away do you think we are from that?
Well, we're already there, remarkably. Couple of things. There's a retailer in Chicago called Wingtip, and they are a clothing retailer that also includes a social club. So in order to shop the store, you need to be a member of the social club. So there's one way in which the retailer is actually monetizing the store by virtue of what you could look at as being an admission fee. But I'll give you an even better one. I was in Tokyo last year, and I did a book signing at a bookstore called Bunkitsu. And at Bunkitsu, it doesn't exactly operate like a normal bookstore, because when you go in, you have to pay about $14 US admission to get into the bookstore. I'll repeat that. You pay $14 to get in. And
Barnes
you
and
can't
Noble
stay
is
as long
trying
as
to
you
figure
want.
that model out.
Yeah. And it took me a while, too. So you pay your $14 and you get what they call a bottomless cup of coffee. You can spend the entire day if you want and consume as much coffee as you want, read as many books as you want, buy something if you wish. If you don't, that's fine. They've already made their money. Their observation was that, while a lot of people were coming in, they would, peruse a book and order it online. They started to realize that didn't negate the idea that people like to go to their stores and sit and and sort of enjoy their time reading books. So they said, well, why don't we just charge them to do so? And they're doing very, very well. So we're already there. We're at a point where courageous brands who are really changing the nature of customer experience are developing the courage to say, look, there's value here, and consumers should be willing to pay for it, and in many cases, they are.
Well, Doug, this has been so much fun. I love really getting into the nitty-gritty of the present and the future with you. I want to finish the podcast with one more quote from the book that I thought was, it's one of those that makes you want to really look in the mirror and take some stock. In the future, the only real certainty is that someone is going to completely reinvent what you do. What you need to determine now is whether that someone will be you. And I think that is, for someone that is on the front lines of an industry in the midst of a massive sea change, that's something that really struck home. So, Doug, thank you so much for taking the time, for sharing your wisdom and your research with us, and I very much appreciate it.
It was my pleasure, Adam. Thanks very much for having me.